Hello. So today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite fantasy races, and they specifically the Elves of Tolkien's mythology that he created. I spoke about yesterday, his mythology for England. Everyone tends to gravitate towards the hobbits. Me, I've always been interested in the elves, especially after I read the Silmarillion, which details their history and the history of Middle-earth and how men play into it. It's written from the perspective of the elves. The elves obviously are based off of Norse mythology and Scandinavian folklore, also known as fairies in the Celtic world. Fairies we often think of as being small and wings, but the fairies didn't look like that at all. That is more French than that is Celtic. They look like we did. We obviously don't have wings, and we're not tiny. But I want to talk about, in his mythology specifically, originally the elves were called the Quindi, those who speak with voices. They called themselves that because they believed they were the only speaking creatures on the planet. Which they would find out not true when they would meet the Vala Orome. And they were invited to go to the land of Aman. And those who obeyed the summons, maybe not obeyed, but they listened to the summons, they became known as the Eldar, while those who stayed behind became the Avari, which meant the unwilling. Eldar means the people of the stars. At this point in time, only the stars lit the world, except for in Aman, where they had the two trees, one of silver, one of gold. And so along the way, the Eldar, they're divided into three specific tribes. You have the Teleri, who were the largest, the Noldor, and the Vanyar. Now, the Eldar are described as having fair skin, dark hair, with blue or gray eyes, except in the house of Finarfin. Now, that's because the Vanyar, they had golden hair. The Narsen was the child of a Vanyaran elf and a Nodoran elf. Now, did all the elves look like this? Probably, maybe in Tolkien's mind, we don't know. The Avari would be referred to as dark elves, not because of the color of their skin, but because they lived in the darkness of Middle-earth. They did not go to Valinor and see the light of the two trees. Along the journey west, the elves come to the Misty Mountains, which were in those days a lot taller. And then some of the Teleri didn't want to go. They didn't want to go over the mountains with the rest of the elves. So they left and went south and became known as the Nondor, or Sylvan elves. Some did go west to the west coast of Middle-earth, called Beleriand, and they were called the Quindi, or green elves, because that's how they were dressed. All dressed in green. those of the Teleri that did go over the Misty Mountains came to Beleriand, and some of them stayed behind, and they became known as the Sindar, or Grey Elves. Those of the Teleri that went with the Noldor and the Vanyar, they went west over the Great Sea to Beleriand. Well, I should say Valinor. Sorry, I got that confused. Now, some of the Noldor do rebel and go back to Middle-earth, build kingdoms there. And that's the whole Silmarillion. There's all about how they went back to Middle-earth and why. I will probably discuss that in a later video. Those are the elves that went to Valinor were the Quindi, Elves of the Light, while those in Middle-earth were the Quindi, or Elves of the Darkness, because they lived, again, in the darkness of Middle-earth. Which eventually would have the sun and the moon, after the two trees are destroyed. But again, I will probably talk about that in a later video. This is just a brief overview of me talking about Tolkien's elves, because they are my favorite of all the races he wrote about. Obviously, he didn't invent them, but he did write a lot about them. I mean, that's mostly what he wrote about until The Hobbit came out. And didn't even realize at the beginning that The Hobbit belonged in the same world. And of course, he was asked for a sequel, and that became, obviously, Lord of the Rings, my favorite book and favorite movie series of all time. Yeah, that's just, that, I guess, would be it today. If you do not, and have not read the Silmarillion, I do suggest that you read it. Get a copy. It's different from Lord of the Rings, I'll tell you that. But it's a great book. But I know this copy is a little worn. I've had it for over 15 years, and it's not my first copy. The first copy I had fell apart, and this is obviously kind of not in great condition. I did tape some of it up, but there you have it. My favorite of all the races that Tolkien wrote about. I will probably do more videos on the others. Men, dwarves, hobbits. Just always been interested in this stuff, and man, I really wish that this Lord of the Rings show would be better than what it sounds like it's going to be. But even if it's good, it's still not going to be as great as the movies. You're just never going to top that. Peter Jackson did such a great job with those, and I don't know what else I could say about them. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you all later.